This video is sponsored by Seymour Duncan.
Modelers have become incredibly common nowadays for live performance. Check your local scene, check touring bands, you'll be sure to see a ton of modelers in the mix. I've been using this neural DSP quad Cortex for nearly all of my shows since the start of 2024, and I've learned a lot about using it live. And while it sounds great and makes it super easy to handle all of my different musical projects, it's not without its limitations. For starters, this is mainly a DI device, and not every venue you play is going to be able to handle DI setups. Just because guitarists are updating their rigs doesn't mean that every dive bar in town is updating their sound system as well. And when you play a lot of local shows, some nights, you don't know what you're going to be plugging your guitar into. Sometimes one of the bands says they're going to provide the backline, sometimes the venue says they're going to provide the backline, sometimes there's just a miscommunication in the group chat. And unfortunately, the amps provided won't always suit your sound. And when I set my quad Cortex to sound like a ripping Marshall stack, the last thing I want to plug into is the 20-watt Fender Champion they keep behind the bar. You know which one I'm talking about. And that's why I'm excited to add this new player to my lineup, the Seymour Duncan PowerStage 200. I want to teach you how to use the PowerStage 200 with your quad Cortex and avoid any of the common setup mistakes you might run into. While the advice I'm giving is suited for the quad Cortex, it will also work if you have a different modeler. Now, the PowerStage 200 is a pedal board amplifier that is made with modelers in mind. It's practically designed for them. It's small, so it'll comfortably fit in your gig bag or on your pedal board. And the build quality is super solid. I'm sure this would hold up if it got a collateral stomp. Now, the PowerStage 200 model gives you 200 watts of clean amplification for powering passive cabinets. And it gives you the flexibility to use your quad Cortex in any live situation through any cabinet without having to worry about what the venue can handle. The PowerStage also has tons of clean headroom, which gives you a consistent sound at any volume. So whatever level you're practicing at in your bedroom will sound the exact same when you crank it up on a stage. Because it's kind of a nightmare when you set up the perfect tone at home and you get to the venue and it sounds completely different. I'm sure that's happened to everyone at least once. Trust me, you don't want that. And on a personal note, as someone who lives in a small apartment and relies on the quad Cortex for quiet recording, it just feels nice to plug into a big amp once in a while. So here are the features you need to know. On the back, you'll find a mono 1/4 inch as well as an auxiliary in. The aux is helpful in case you wanted to run like drum grooves or backing tracks through it as well. Then we have dual mono speaker outputs with 200 watts, so you can really get as loud as you want with this thing. If you're worried about being heard over the drummer, you'll be lucky if you can even hear the drummer. But if you need to be quiet, like me, because I'm still in a tiny apartment, it does have a headphone out for silent practice. Alongside the main output, the PowerStage also has a mono balanced output that can go direct to front of house or to an interface for recording. The mono balanced output has a cab simulator option, which is super convenient because when you're using a physical cab, you don't need the cabinet simulator on your quad Cortex. You don't need the modeled cab running into the physical cab. That's one cab too many. But when you turn the cabinet simulator off on the modeler, the DI sounds terrible. Being able to add that cab simulation back to your DI signal makes it sound usable again. And it gives your sound tech the freedom to pan it, blend it, add effects. I'll be honest, I'm not a sound tech, so I don't actually know what they do with it, but I'm willing to learn. And finally, the PowerStage has a 4-band EQ for bass, middle, treble, and presence. Since you're using a quad Cortex, all of your EQing is probably already done in your presets, but these can be really helpful for fine-tuning yourself to the acoustics of the room you're playing. Having them as physical controls is super convenient for making these kinds of adjustments on the fly. You don't need a menu dive, you don't need to change your presets, and you don't need to be the reason why there's no time to sound check the opener. That one's personal, I'll admit it. So anyways, here's how I've got this set up. I've got the output of my quad Cortex going directly to the 1/4 inch input on the PowerStage. Then I have the output of the PowerStage going directly to the passive cabinet. Notice that I'm using speaker cable to connect the PowerStage to the cabinet and not instrument cable. I know this looks like a pedal, but it's not. It's an amplifier and it's very powerful. Make sure you use the right cable. And like I mentioned before, you can also use the mono balanced out to go directly to front of house or to an interface. Now, before you start playing, it's a good idea to calibrate your volume levels. You'll notice right under the volume knob, we have these LED clipping indicators. So if the signal coming from your quad Cortex is too loud, the preamp clipping light will flash to let you know that your signal is distorting in a bad way. The preamp clipping light has about 6 decibels of compensation, so you might want to set your quad Cortex to where the light just flicks on when you're strumming your hardest. And if your signal is still clipping, gradually turn down the volume on the quad Cortex and turn up the volume on the PowerStage until you get the level you want. Now, with all of that setup out of the way, let's hear some sounds. that is the Seymour Duncan PowerStage 200. I want to give a big thanks to Seymour Duncan for sponsoring this video and sending me this unit to use for future shows. You can find a link for the PowerStage 200 down in the description of this video. And I want to know what you think. Do you think a pedalboard style amp like this would suit your style of playing live? If you tend to stay away from modelers, would an amp like this convince you otherwise? Let me know your thoughts below, and I'll see you next time.